Marlo Mitchell woke up to the sound of a garbage truck crashing down the street like it was fueled by vengeance. She bolted upright, heart pounding. No, 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 she muttered, snatching her phone off the nightstand. 7:43 a.m. Her bus to the city left at 7:30. I'm dead, she whispered as she scrambled out of bed, threw on jeans, a wrinkled blouse, and shoved her feet into mismatched sneakers. She grabbed her tote, half a granola bar, and raced out the door of her tiny rental room above the bakery. The bus was long gone. Marlo stood on the corner, panting, watching the taillights disappear down the hill. She swore under her breath. Her boss at the gallery already had one foot out the door to fire her. Today was her last chance to prove she could handle the new exhibit. She pulled out her phone to order a rideshare, but it wouldn't load. No Wi-Fi, no balance left. Her stomach dropped. Great, just perfect. You okay? She spun around. A sleek black car, a luxury one, the kind that practically purred instead of idled, had rolled up beside her. The window was down, and a man in a crisp white shirt and dark sunglasses looked at her with a raised brow. He was ridiculously attractive. The kind that made you forget how to form words. Strong jaw, dark hair pushed back, that effortless confidence like he'd never been late a day in his life. I'm fine, she said quickly, stepping back, awkward. Just missed my bus, I'll figure it out. Where you heading? She hesitated. Downtown, Lexington and 44th. He leaned over and popped the passenger door open. I'm going past there, hop in. Marlo blinked. What? I'm not a serial killer, he added, like that made it better. I just don't like seeing people stranded. You can say no. Her eyes darted to the empty sidewalk. The next bus wouldn't be for another hour. She'd be fired by then. Her stomach twisted. Okay, she said before she could talk herself out of it. Thanks. The inside of the car smelled like leather and mint. She buckled in, trying not to touch anything. There was a quiet hum, jazz playing low on the speakers. He glanced at her again when they stopped at a red light. I'm Parker Vale, he said casually. Marlo Mitchell. You always run this late, Marlo Mitchell. She let out a breathy laugh. Only on days where I need my job to not fire me. Gallery girl, her head snapped toward him. How did you? He shrugged. You've got paint on your elbow. She glanced down. A blue smudge. Oh, right, you work at the Lexington Gallery. She narrowed her eyes. Yeah. How do you know that? I've been there once or twice. You into art? I'm into investing in things that matter. She nodded slowly, unsure what that meant, but he didn't elaborate. He changed the subject instead. Why don't you drive? I'm saving up, she said, not embarrassed, just honest. New York's expensive and I'm behind on rent. He tilted his head, studying her. You're not from here. Small town girl, moved here 8 months ago, still adjusting. He smiled faintly. You're brave or stupid. Brave, he repeated. They rode in silence for a few blocks. She kept noticing little things, the smoothness of the drive, how the dashboard glowed with a digital interface she'd never seen before, and a watch on his wrist that probably cost more than her student loans. Are you sure you're going past Lexington and 44th? She asked, suspicion creeping in. Nope, he said, turning the wheel. I'm late for a meeting in Tribeca, but you looked like you needed the help. Her mouth opened. You're going completely out of your way, he glanced at her. It's not a crime to do something decent. When he pulled up outside the gallery, she fumbled with her seatbelt. Thank you, seriously, you saved my job. He reached into the console and pulled out a sleek black card. If you ever need a ride again. She stared at it. Are you a rideshare driver? He laughed. No, I just think people like you deserve more than missed buses. She took the card. There was no company name, just his name, Parker Vale. Thanks, she said again, stepping out. He leaned across the seat. Good luck in there. She closed the door, still stunned, and watched as he drove off through traffic like it parted for him. By the time she made it home that night, she was exhausted. The exhibit had gone well, and her boss surprisingly told her she could stay on for another month. She flopped onto her bed and pulled the card from her bag. She ran her fingers over the name. Parker Vale. There was no number, no contact details, just a small logo embossed in silver. She looked it up on her laptop, her jaw dropped. Parker Vale was a millionaire entrepreneur. Founder of a private investment firm. He was on Forbes' 30 under 30 list, multiple properties, luxury cars, international partnerships, and he'd given her a ride like it was nothing. Her heart raced. She wasn't sure if she was more shocked or flattered, or both. 2 days later, she missed the bus again, this time thanks to a power outage that shut off her alarm. She stood on the same corner, groaning. A horn honked. She turned. The black car pulled up again. Parker leaned out the window. "You might need to rethink your mornings," she laughed, running to the car. "You are not serious. I figured I'd check and bring you coffee." She slid into the seat, stunned. There was a cup holder with an extra latte waiting for her. "How did you know I'd be here?" Instinct. She looked at him. "You don't even know me." Parker's eyes met hers. Not yet. Her heart skipped. That week, he drove her 3 times. Each time he picked her up, there was some tiny luxury waiting. A croissant, a scarf she mentioned once. A playlist of her favorite band playing when she got in. And each time she told herself not to fall for it, but she was. Hard, he never flirted in the usual way, he just listened. Remembered things she didn't even recall saying. He asked about her paintings, her dreams, how she saw the world. He talked about his company like it was a side note, not his entire empire. One morning he pulled up, holding a paper bag. "What's that?" she asked. "Lunch for you." "Parker, I figured you skipped breakfast again." Inside were 2 sandwiches, fruit, and a bottle of water. She stared at it, touched. "You don't have to keep doing this." "I know." She paused. "Why are you?" He met her eyes. "Because every time you smile, it makes my day better." She blinked, caught off guard, then very softly she said, "You're going to ruin me for normal guys." He grinned. "That's the plan." The gallery's front door stuck halfway open, the wood swollen from the rain the night before. Marlowe shoved it with her shoulder, slipping through with a hiss of breath. Her hair was still damp from her mad dash through the drizzle, and her clothes clung to her skin. But she was inside. She was on time, barely. She dumped her tote behind the front desk and caught her reflection in the glass of a nearby display case. Her eyeliner had smudged into what looked like an artistic choice, and her blouse had a faint coffee stain where the lid hadn't sealed properly on the cup Parker had handed her that morning. She tried to blot it with the edge of a brochure. "Mitchell," came her boss's clipped voice from across the room, "you're introducing the Adler piece at the press preview this afternoon." "I thought Lauren was doing that," she called in sick. "You're up." Marlowe's stomach dropped. The Adler exhibit was a massive acquisition, a provocative collection of abstract oil work that had already drawn attention from several high-profile collectors. Any slip-up would be career suicide. "I'll prep the talking points now," she said, voice steadier than she felt. She didn't have time to think about Parker. Not the way he'd pulled up with an umbrella already open and waiting, or the way he'd casually placed a warm paper bag in her lap while saying nothing about the storm. Not his cologne, subtle and complicated, or how his eyes had lingered on her a moment too long when she'd said she was nervous about the day. She had to focus. This was her moment. The press preview was packed. Reporters with notepads and stylists with clipboards hovered like bees around the room. Marlowe stood in front of the central Adler piece, an enormous, chaotic smear of crimson and slate on canvas, and cleared her throat. "Thank you all for being here." This piece, titled Collapse in C minor, was painted in the weeks following Adler's divorce. You can see the tension. A door creaked open at the back of the room. Marlowe didn't stop speaking, but her gaze flicked briefly toward the sound. Parker, she nearly lost her train of thought. He wasn't wearing sunglasses this time. His eyes were sharp, alert. He wasn't trying to hide. Why was he here? She finished her talk without stumbling, though her pulse drummed wildly the entire time. Afterward, the crowd dispersed in 2s and 3s, and she slipped away from the center of the room and headed through the side corridor. He was already there, leaning against the narrow wall near the exit. "Didn't expect to see you," she said, heart still racing. "I had a meeting at the bank across the street, saw the press signs. Thought I'd come in. Curious timing. I like seeing people do what they're good at." Marlowe exhaled slowly, still gripping the portfolio in her arms. "You didn't tell me you were on the board for the Reynolds Foundation." "I didn't think it would matter." "It does. That's one of the gallery's biggest donors." He stepped closer. "Does it change anything?" "I don't know," she admitted. "You're not just the guy who gives me rides anymore." "I never was just that." She looked away, trying to sort through the sudden whirl of feelings. "Are you here to check up on the exhibit or on me?" "I came to see you." Her throat tightened. He took in the tension in her shoulders. "You're not used to people showing up for you, are you? Is anyone?" "I am." She studied him for a long moment. "What is this, Parker?" He didn't look away. "You tell me." She caught the sound of approaching footsteps and stepped back from him instinctively. Her boss walked by, offering her a tight nod. "I should get back," she said quietly. He reached into his jacket and handed her a folded piece of thick stationery. "Open it later." She slipped it into her bag, not daring to look at it until she was home hours later, curled up on her bed with her laptop closed and her nerves finally calm. It was an invitation, a private gala. Black tie, hosted at the rooftop ballroom of the Delacroix Hotel. The name at the bottom wasn't his. It was the event's host, Vale Holdings. She stared at it, stunned. She flipped it over. Handwritten in neat script were 5 words. "Come find me if you're curious." Her pulse stuttered. That Friday, she stood in front of her closet with a pit in her stomach. Everything she owned looked like it belonged in a college lecture hall or a second-hand bookstore. Not a gala. She didn't have the money for a new dress, but she tried her best to piece together something elegant from what she had: a simple black midi-length gown she'd worn to her cousin's wedding 2 years ago, plus a pair of borrowed heels from her neighbor upstairs. When she stepped into the Delacroix lobby, she almost turned around and left. The ceilings soared 3 stories high, glass chandeliers catching the light and breaking it into 1,000 pieces. People glided past her in gowns that shimmered like starlight and tuxedos pressed to perfection. A string quartet played in the corner and waiters carried trays of champagne without ever bumping into anyone. She edged toward the elevator, heart hammering. The ballroom doors opened with a soft chime. Parker was inside, standing near one of the large windows, his back to the skyline. He was laughing at something a man beside him said, but when he turned and saw her, the expression on his face changed. He crossed the space between them in a dozen strides. "You came. I wasn't sure I should. I'm glad you did. Why invite me to this?" "Because I wanted you to see my world." She looked around. "It's a lot. Too much, more than I'm used to." He leaned in slightly. "I don't expect you to be impressed." "I'm not," she said, and immediately regretted how blunt it sounded, but his smile only widened. "Good, then I can stop pretending I'm trying to impress you." "You weren't. Du croissants every morning count," she laughed before she could stop herself. He offered her a glass of champagne, and they moved to the side of the room where the noise was less deafening. "Is this what your life is always like?" she asked. "Parts of it. The rest is conference calls and too much travel." "Does any of it feel real?" He paused. "Most of it doesn't. And me, you feel realer than anything I've touched in years." She didn't know what to say to that. Her chest tightened. He leaned against the railing that overlooked the city. "I've been surrounded by people who want things from me for so long, I forgot what it felt like to want something for no reason at all." She turned toward him. "What is it you want?" He didn't answer right away. "I want to know what makes you angry, what makes you laugh. I want to know why you flinch every time someone offers to help, and why you act like kindness is a debt you'll never repay." She swallowed hard. "I want to know if you'd ever let someone in." "I don't know," she whispered. "I haven't yet." "I'll wait," he said without hesitation. She looked at him, this man who had more money than she could fathom, who could have chosen anyone in that room tonight. And he was standing in front of her like she was the only person he could see. He reached into his blazer pocket and handed her a small, rectangular box. She stared at it. "I can't take anything else from you," she said quickly. "It's not a gift," he said. "It's a favor." She opened the lid. Inside was a key. "Parker, it's for the car," he said, "in case you miss the bus again." She looked up at him, stunned. "You're giving me your car?" "I have more than one." "I can't accept this." "You don't have to. Just hold on to the key in case you change your mind." Marlowe didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Why me?" she asked, voice barely audible. "Because when I met you, you didn't want anything from me. You just needed a ride." She nodded slowly, winded by the honesty of it. "And now?" she asked. "Now I need something from you," he said, stepping closer. "I need you to trust me." She didn't answer. She just looked at the key in her hand like it was a question she hadn't figured out how to answer yet. Marlowe didn't use the key. Even after he gave it to her, even after she tucked it into the small zipper pocket of her tote and couldn't stop thinking about it, she still didn't use it. Not the next morning, not the one after. She kept catching herself reaching for her phone, half expecting Parker to appear beside her at the curb again, but he didn't. He gave her space. And it unsettled her more than his presence ever had. It wasn't that she didn't want to see him. It was that she did too much. And she didn't know what to do with that. He was out of her depth in every conceivable way, not just the money, though that was staggering. It was the way he moved through the world with such certainty, the way he looked at her like he already knew how she tasted when she cried, like he wanted to memorize every inch of her before she could bolt. She wasn't used to being seen like that. 2 days after the gala, she stayed late at the gallery to finish rearranging one of the new installations. Her feet were sore from standing, her arms aching from lifting mounted frames, and her nerves wore thinner every hour she pretended things were normal. She locked up after 9 and stepped out onto the sidewalk, the air cold enough to sting her cheeks. She didn't hear the car until it pulled up beside her, headlights cutting across the wet pavement. Parker leaned out the open window, resting his elbow on the edge. "You missed your bus again," he said. She exhaled slowly, not quite a laugh. "You were watching the gallery. I drove past, thought I'd wait a minute and see if you came out." She hesitated, then walked over and opened the door. "You're persistent. I'm patient." She slid into the passenger seat and shut the door. "There's a difference. One gets results." She glanced at him, and for a beat, neither of them spoke. Finally, she said, "This isn't just a game to you, is it?" "No, but I think you want it to be." That would make walking away easier. She looked out the windshield, watching the streetlights blur past as he pulled into traffic. "What if I'm not built for this? You're not built for pretending you're okay with less than you deserve." "That's what you've been doing for years." She didn't answer. The silence pressed around them, not uncomfortable but thick with the weight of unsaid things. He turned onto a quieter street, one lined with tall sycamores and brownstones. "I wasn't trying to impress you with the gala. I know," he glanced at her again, "but I did want you to see that I'm not hiding anything. You think I'm waiting for the catch. I know you are." She didn't deny it. He slowed the car in front of her building, but didn't put it in park. "Just let it idle. Do you want to come up?" she asked, the words out before she could second-guess them. He studied her face. "Only if that's what you want." "I wouldn't have asked if it wasn't." Upstairs, the apartment was small and a little chaotic. A stack of canvases leaned against the far wall, and the scent of turpentine hung faintly in the air. She moved around, picking up a sweater, clearing a mug off the table. "I wasn't expecting company." He stepped inside and looked around, taking it all in without comment. His gaze landed on a half-finished painting on the easel by the window, a swirl of deep ochre and gray, sharp angles cutting through the center like broken glass. "That one's different from the others," he said. "It's not finished." He moved closer. "It's angry." "I was." "At what?" "Everything." He didn't ask her to explain, just stood there, quiet, letting her choose whether to keep speaking. "I came here to start over," she said, voice softer now, "but I didn't realize how hard it would be to build something from nothing. Some days I feel like I'm one missed paycheck from vanishing. You're not nothing." "I didn't say I was." "You didn't have to." She looked at him then, the way his eyes didn't shy away from her honesty, the way he didn't try to fix it or offer a solution, just held space for it. She crossed the room and stood in front of him. "You make it hard to keep pretending I don't feel anything." He didn't touch her, just said, "Then don't pretend." The kiss wasn't rushed, it wasn't explosive, it was slow, deliberate, like he was giving her every opportunity to pull away. She didn't. She leaned into him, hands on the lapels of his coat, mouth soft and tentative against his. When they parted, her forehead rested against his chest. His heartbeat was steady beneath her ear. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I am too," he said, voice low. They didn't sleep together that night. Instead, he stayed until she fell asleep on the couch, curled beneath a throw blanket with her head on his shoulder. He didn't move, didn't wake her when his phone buzzed with calendar reminders or missed calls. He just sat there, his arm around her, like he belonged exactly where he was. When she woke the next morning, he was gone, but the key was still in her bag, and this time she didn't pretend it wasn't real. At the gallery later that day, her boss handed her a cream-colored envelope without a word. She opened it and stared, an invitation to the annual Reynolds Foundation Benefactors Brunch. Only senior staff were typically invited. She was neither senior nor staff in the traditional sense. It came with a note, her boss added. Said requested by name, care to explain? I have no idea, Marlowe lied, tucking the envelope into her portfolio. She didn't hear from Parker that day, and she didn't call. But when Sunday arrived, she stood in front of the gilded doors of the Langham clubhouse, wearing a borrowed navy dress and heels that pinched her toes. Her name was on the list. She was led past champagne flutes and linen-covered tables to the back terrace, where a string quartet played something soft and polite. Parker was there, standing with a group of men in tailored suits, but he broke away the moment he saw her. You came, he said, his expression unreadable. You invited me. I didn't think you'd say yes. I almost didn't. What changed your mind? She looked around at the polished crowd, the manicured garden beyond the terrace, the way he stood in the middle of it, all like it was his kingdom. I wanted to see what it felt like, she said. And she met his gaze. I don't hate it, he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. There's something I need to tell you, her stomach tightened. What is it? My firm Vail Holdings is merging with a new international investor. The deal's been under negotiation for months. The brunch today is part of the announcement. And after the merger, I'll be relocating to London for 6 months. She didn't react, not right away. She just stared at him as if trying to process the words before they could sink in. When? She asked. Next week. That's fast. Deals like this don't wait. She stepped back slightly. Were you ever going to tell me if I hadn't come today? Of course I was. Before or after you left, I was hoping it wouldn't matter. But it does. He exhaled slowly. I didn't plan on meeting you, Marlowe. I didn't plan on any of this, but I'm not walking away from it. You're moving across the world, and I want you to come with me. She stared at him. What? I want you to come to London. You can't be serious. I am. I can find you a space to paint, introduce you to galleries. You can keep working for the Lexington remotely, or I'll help you find something new. You want me to just uproot my entire life. I want you to trust that maybe what we have is worth the risk. She didn't answer, not yet. Because suddenly, everything she'd been so sure of was no longer solid under her feet. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't know what came next. Marlowe didn't answer right away. Parker's words hung between them like a thread pulled too tight, stretched across the distance of linen-draped tables and clinking glasses. The garden behind the terrace was quiet, just the faint rustle of wind through hedges and the distant chime of cutlery. But inside her chest, everything was a storm. She stared at him, her throat dry. You want me to leave everything and move to another country with you? I want you to come with me because I know what this is, Parker said. I know what we are. And I'm not going to pretend it's small or temporary just because it happened fast. She shook her head, her voice low. We barely know each other. I know you steal glances at people's shoes to guess their stories. I know you hum when you're concentrating, and I know you shrink when someone offers you help because you were taught to survive without it. Her eyes burned. I know enough to be sure, he said. Marlowe stepped back. I can't just disappear from my life, Parker. I'm not asking you to disappear. I'm asking you to live. I have a job, she said, her tone sharper than she intended. I have responsibilities. Then let's figure it out together. She looked around the terrace at the sea of polished faces, the quiet power, the casual elegance threaded through every detail. It wasn't her world, not even close, and yet he was asking her to step into it like she belonged. I need time, she said finally. He didn't push, he just nodded once. Then take it. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the stone, his gaze following her all the way to the door. For the next 3 days, she didn't call, she didn't answer his. She buried herself in work, stayed late at the gallery, and told herself she needed clarity. What she really needed was space to breathe, but nothing brought clarity. Not the familiar rhythm of her day, not the canvases she tried to lose herself in, not even the comfort of routine. Everywhere she turned, his presence lingered like an echo. The way he looked at her like she was the only real thing in a room full of pretense. The way he listened like her voice mattered more than the noise of the world. On the fourth night, she found herself standing in front of a building she hadn't planned to visit. It was limestone and glass, tucked behind a quiet row of brownstones. She hesitated at the door, then buzzed in. The woman who answered was older, sharp-eyed, and wore a silk scarf knotted at her throat. "You must be Marlowe," she said. "He left instructions if you came." Marlowe blinked. "Instructions?" The woman stepped aside. "He's not here." "But he said if you showed up, I was to let you in." She hesitated, then stepped inside. The hallway smelled faintly of cedar and something warmer. A painting hung on the wall, an original, unmistakably a Rothko. She traced each step down the hall like it was sacred. The woman led her to a room on the second floor and opened the door. "He said to leave you alone once you were here. Take your time." Then she was gone. The room was flooded with natural light. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a quiet courtyard. In the center was a desk, sleek, modern, and beside it, an easel. A canvas sat on it, blank. Next to it, a set of brushes, oils, and a small note, "For when you're ready." Her breath caught in her throat. She sank into the armchair by the window, heart thudding. He hadn't pushed. He hadn't bargained or begged. He'd simply made space for her, and he'd done it in the one way that mattered to her most. He saw her. She didn't wait until morning. She left the building, caught the last train uptown, and texted him from the platform. The next day, she stood outside his office. The receptionist looked up, startled. "He's in a meeting." "I'll wait." It took 40 minutes, and when the door finally opened, Parker stepped out, halfway through a sentence to a man in a navy suit. Then he saw her. He stopped mid-step. "I need to talk to you," she said. The man beside him looked between them, then wisely nodded and excused himself. Parker didn't speak. He just waited. Marlowe stepped forward. "I'm not scared of the move. I'm scared of not mattering once I'm there. You think I'd let that happen? I think I've spent too long being replaceable. I don't want to be a footnote in someone else's world." "You're not a footnote," he said, his voice rougher now. "You're the reason I'm not running from it anymore." She blinked, caught off guard. "I've spent my entire life building things that look good from the outside," he said. "But you're the first thing I've wanted that actually feels good from the inside." She stepped closer. "If I say yes, I need to do it my way. I wouldn't want it any other way. I need time to find work. To make something for myself. I'll give you whatever time you need. But I don't want a penthouse or a studio handed to me. You'll get no argument from me. And I'm not moving for you. I'm moving because I want to see what we become." He reached for her hand. "Then let's find out." Their fingers laced, and this time she didn't pull away. The move happened in stages. She gave notice at the gallery, boxed up her studio, and found a short-term sublet in London with peeling walls and a view of the river. Parker flew ahead to finalize the merger, and she followed 2 weeks later. They didn't live together immediately. She insisted on her own space. He respected it. But he came by every night, sometimes with takeout, sometimes with nothing but time, and she painted. More than she ever had. The city gave her new lines, new light, new color, and he gave her room to become. 3 months in, she had her first solo showing at a converted loft in Shoreditch. The place was packed. Parker stood at the back, silent, watching as buyers and curators circled her work. He didn't interfere. Didn't name drop. He just watched her take up space. After the final guest left, he walked toward her and held out a small envelope. "This is for you." She opened it. Inside was a folded lease agreement. "What is this?" "A space, not a gift, a partnership, co-owned legally." "You'll have full autonomy." She stared at the address. It was a gallery. He raised his hand before she could speak. "You said you wanted to build something that couldn't be taken away, so let's build it together." Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. She just walked into his arms and held him like it was the first time all over again. A year later, she stood in front of a crowded room at the grand opening of their gallery. Her work hung on the walls, but so did others. Emerging artists, bold voices. She'd curated every piece. Parker stood beside her, his hand resting at the small of her back. She turned toward him. "You know, I still don't understand it." "What?" How a mist bus turned into this. He smiled, something quiet but certain. "I do." "How?" "Because fate doesn't shout, it whispers." You just have to be paying attention. She leaned up and kissed him softly. Well, next time I miss a bus, I hope it's at least this productive. He laughed and pulled her closer. There won't be a next time. You're never taking a bus again. Now that, she whispered, sounds like love. And it was, the kind that didn't arrive with fireworks or declarations, but with keys tucked inside coat pockets, space left on a blank canvas, and a ride offered without question. She hadn't fallen for a millionaire. She'd fallen for a man who saw her. And she was never going back. Marlowe stood by the gallery's front display window, her fingers trailing the edge of the glass as the early spring sun poured in through the tall panes. Outside, London was shaking off its winter with a quiet kind of grace. The sidewalks were teeming with life, couples with coffee cups, children dragging scooters behind them, and street musicians tuning their violins on corners. Inside, the gallery was still. The kind of stillness that came after movement, after celebration. The grand opening had come and gone, and with it, the whirlwind of press, buyers, and collectors. Now came the real work, the quiet part. The building behind her, the sound of careful footsteps echoed through the space, then paused. You're doing it again, Parker said. She didn't turn. Doing what? Staring out like you're wondering if you belong here. I wasn't, liar. She exhaled and finally faced him. He wore a soft gray sweater and dark trousers, his hair slightly tousled like he hadn't had time to smooth it down. He looked more like himself than he ever had in a boardroom. You ever feel like you're standing inside a version of your life you dreamed about but didn't quite believe you'd get? She asked. Every day, Marlowe crossed her arms loosely. I keep expecting someone to walk in and tell me they made a mistake, that this isn't mine. Parker stepped closer. It is, and no one's taking it. She nodded slowly, then gestured toward the back. The interns are arriving soon to prep for tomorrow's showcase. I already told them to come an hour later, she blinked. Why? Because you've been running nonstop for months, and because we have something else to do. Now, he held up a folded paper. I booked a train. A train to where, you'll see. Marlowe hesitated, but the look in his eyes told her there was no point arguing. She followed him out into the sunlight, and together they walked down the narrow street to the station, where a first-class car waited with their names already on the manifest. She didn't ask questions. Not even when the countryside blurred past the windows, or when the train slowed into a private platform surrounded by green hills and stone walls. The driver who met them at the station wore a navy peacoat and greeted Parker by name. Marlowe climbed into the back seat of the waiting car, her curiosity now a thrum beneath her skin. They drove for almost an hour, winding through quiet farmland and narrow roads lined with dry stone fences. When they finally stopped, it was in front of a modest estate nestled in a valley. Not ostentatious, more like somewhere time had forgotten, Marlowe stepped out and turned in a slow circle. Where are we? Parker came to stand beside her, hands in his pockets. My mother's village. She grew up just over that hill. Marlowe turned to him, surprised. You've never mentioned your parents. He kept his eyes on the landscape. My mother passed away before I graduated college. She never got to see what any of this became. She stayed quiet, sensing the weight in his voice. She wanted to be a painter, he said, but she never had the chance. Her father thought it was a waste of time. She worked 2 jobs and made sure I had everything I needed, but she never got to paint. Marlowe's chest tightened. She used to bring me out here when I was little, said the light was different, softer. She believed beauty lived in quiet places. Marlowe touched his arm gently. So why bring me here? He looked at her then. Because I bought the house 4 years ago. I kept telling myself I'd restore it someday, make it something worthy of her, but I never had a reason to. Her breath caught. I do now. She stepped back, trying to process it. Are you saying? I want to turn it into a retreat, he said. For young artists, photographers, writers, anyone who needs a place to breathe and create. We'll build studios across the field, host residencies. And in the main house, we'll keep her things. As a tribute, her eyes filled. Parker, he took her hand. I want to do it with you. She couldn't speak for a moment. I've never built anything that mattered outside of numbers, he said, but this could matter. You could help guide it. Choose who comes, curate the collections. Mentor. She nodded slowly, the vision unfurling in her mind, vivid and real. I don't know what to say yes. She looked at the house, the fields, the sky that stretched so wide it felt like it could carry every version of herself she had ever wanted to become. Yes, she whispered. They spent the afternoon walking the land, tracing the old stone foundation, mapping where studios could go. Later, they sat on the steps of the house, watching the sun dip low over the hills, turning everything gold. Parker leaned back on his hands. This is the first time in years I haven't been thinking about what's next. You're always thinking about what's next. Not today. She laid her head on his shoulder. I think your mother would have liked this. I think she would have liked you. They sat like that until the wind turned cool. Back in the city, the weeks blurred again, but the rhythm had changed. Marlowe took meetings with artists applying for the first residency. Parker oversaw the renovation from afar, never interfering, only making sure she had what she needed. They remained separate in their work, but together in everything else. It worked because they let it. On a rainy afternoon in late spring, Marlowe came home to find the apartment dark except for the soft flicker of candles lining the hallway. A trail of petals led to the balcony, where Parker stood with a small velvet box in his hand. She opened her mouth, but he shook his head. Let me go first, she laughed, breathless. Okay, I've built companies, I've closed billion-dollar deals. But none of it ever felt like a foundation until I met you. You made me slow down, you made me look. You made me want a future that wasn't just about building, but about belonging. Her heart beat so loud she couldn't hear the rain anymore. So I'm asking, he said quietly, will you marry me? She didn't hesitate. Yes, they didn't have a grand ceremony, just a quiet gathering in the garden behind their new retreat surrounded by artists and friends. Marlowe wore a dress made of silk and sunlight, her hair pinned with wildflowers. Parker wore a suit that didn't try too hard. They said their vows beneath a canopy of trees, the wind rustling like an old hymn. Afterward, Marlowe stood beside him, watching their guests dance and laugh and drink wine under the stars. You know, she said, I think I'm finally done waiting for the other shoe to drop. That's good, he said, wrapping his arm around her waist, because I threw all my shoes away. She laughed, resting her head against his chest. This is real, isn't it? It always was, and it was. Because love didn't always arrive with warning or logic. Sometimes it came in the form of a missed bus, a ride offered without expectation, a key handed over in silence, a retreat built in memory, a promise made under the open sky. They built their life together in brushstrokes and balance sheets, in early morning coffee and long walks through fields still damp with dew. Their love wasn't perfect, but it was deep, earned, steady as the rhythm of their shared days, and they never looked back.